Kathy Lou Colmorgan.
All right, well, thank you for joining us today. How long have you lived in Red Bank?
My entire life, which is over 65 years.
Wow. And during the time you grew up in Red Bank, what part of town did you live in?
In fact, I lived in the same house I lived in that my parents moved into when I was a year old. So it's over near the railroad station with the ice hockey rink in the backyard.
Okay, wow. Is that on the east side or the west side?
It's technically the east side because the dividing line has always been the railroad tracks.
Mm-hmm.
So, but if you use Maple Avenue as the dividing line, then it's the west side.
Gotcha. And growing up, did your family attend any church or religious services?
Yes, Trinity Episcopal Church, which is right across the street almost across the street from here.
Very cool. And at this church, was it the congregation? Was it mostly like what was the makeup of the congregation, the backgrounds of the people who attended? Because we know like St. Anthony's had been a primarily Italian church, St. James was mainly Irish.
Well, my family was German descent, but probably more since the Episcopal Church was based on the Anglican Church of England, it would be more probably English, Scottish background, but it was a mixture.
So growing up, were you aware of any like segregation, official or unofficial, going on in the town?
I didn't know it at the time, and I didn't realize it's segregation within the town because the schools, the way they were set up, that for 7th and 8th grade I spent in what was totally the black school, basically. The white students were only there for like 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. I realized segregation existed though when I went on an 8th grade trip to Washington, D.C. and realized the reason we stayed in this dump of a hotel was because of the black kids, that they were not allowed in the regular hotels or anything, and even the restaurants, because we always had to take all our meals back there. So that wasn't within the town. Within the town, it was pretty much, I thought, as far as I knew, kind of mixed. I mean, nobody seemed to care.
Outside of the fact that the one school was primarily African American students.
It's because it was neighborhoods.
Yeah.
They did neighborhood schools. River Street School, which is now River Street Commons, was in what was then the black or African American neighborhood. Mechanic Street School, which is an office building, that had a fairly large black population also. Being in the center of town for Oakland Street, which is now the charter school, was more white. I mean, I remember I had one black boy in my class.
So it wasn't so much that it was official segregation. Segregation came from the fact that different communities mostly had different racial or ethnic groups living in them.
Right, it seemed to be more, since they were neighborhood schools. I know after I got out of school, maybe about 10 years or so after that, then they kind of made sure they were mixed. Like Oakland Street, I think was like K3, and Mechanic Street became 4-5. I'm not sure the exact thing. And then River Street was more 6-8 to kind of blend them together a little bit more.
But in the town itself, you feel that there wasn't much of a racist sentiment. It was just the way things were, kind of?
I guess it was just the way they were. I know when I was a senior in high school, there was some black literature posted in the high school. And the students that lived in Red Bank, it's like, to us, it's like, why? Because we just seemed to all get along when we went to school together.
Anti-black literature.
Anti-black literature was posted because when I was in high school, there was Homedale, Little Silver, and Shrewsbury students also with Red Bank students. And as far as the Red Bank students were concerned, we all seemed to get along with each other.
You went to Red Bank Regional?
Well, it was Red Bank High School when I was there. It became regional 2 years after.
We had read about that, the incident of the anti-black propaganda being disseminated, but we haven't spoken to anyone who was there for it.
Yeah.
Can you speak to anything more about it? Where the authorities were called in, weren't they?
Well, I think they had the authorities. We had a mass meeting in the gym of the entire student body, and it was almost like thought there was going to be a riot going on because the black students wanted to know who posted it. I mean, we did know that, we did find out eventually it was some students from Little Silver area that had put it up. But as far as, like I said, that those of us that lived in Red Bank, we just sort of got along with each other, so we did not think, we couldn't understand why anybody would do that. But I know there's probably, the black students in the school really felt really bad that it was posted.
It was nasty stuff.
I don't even remember exactly what it was, because I think it was taken down fairly quickly. But I just remember being at the meeting and being afraid, because it almost seemed like a riot was going to occur in the gym. And this was also around the same time that there were the riots up in Newark and Asbury and that whole thing. So it was like bringing it home to the school.
Now, when we were reading about this incident, we had come across a name, Benjamin Glover, who was a police officer.
Mm-hmm.
He was the one in charge of investigating this incident.
Right.
Do you remember him at all? Or?
I knew him. I sort of knew him. Yes. My brother Robert was a police officer.
Okay.
And he wasn't on at that time. He came on shortly after, because he was in the Navy at that time. But no, I didn't know that. I knew who Benjamin Glover was. In fact, when I guess I was a freshman in college, and I worked for, his name just went out of my head. He was the human resources. He was a black police officer that I worked for, sort of worked for him. I was working for somebody else, but I also did some of his work also. His name just went out of my head. I can't think of it now. So.
That's okay. That's all of us. I can't remember what I ate for breakfast. Do you remember, like, were there, in some of our interviews, people have expressed hearing when they were young that there were certain streets you weren't supposed to go to, or certain areas you were supposed to avoid?
Well, not so much when I was a child, because the area where I lived, we were all over the neighborhoods. As I got older, and my brother was on the police force, he told me do not go down Shrewsbury Avenue or Layton Avenue after dark. But I did have a friend that lived on Bank Street, so that area I kind of could go to Bank Street, but I had to try not to go onto Layton Avenue or Shrewsbury Avenue too much. I mean, they lived between those two streets, so it was a little hard, but it was that area. It was told, he had told me don't go after dark, because you never knew what was going to happen. And I think part of that was the fact that I was a girl.